Welcome back to a brand new video, and I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Today's project is how to loom knit slipper socks, one of my favorite cozy items to make this time of year. Let's roll. For supplies, you will need a 24 peg round loom, looming hook, scissors, crochet hook, yarn needle, and if you have one on hand, a clothing measuring tape or tape measure. For yarn, I'm using Hobby Lobby's Yarn Bee Effortless. Originally for the socks, I was going to do 2 colors, and I did the first sock prior to this video and did it half blue and then half white, but then I lost my blue yarn, and to make matters worse, I went on to Hobby Lobby's website, and it turns out that they ran out of that color, so my socks kind of look a little stupid because I only had biscotti left and I can only use one color. If you're interested in how to do the color change though, it's really simple. You just tie on the new yarn, but I'll show you that in a techniques video that I'm coming out with. Just use whatever you have. Personally, I really like the soft, thick yarns with like 20% alpaca or something because they keep your feet warmer. Start off by making a slip knot or tying a knot to your anchor peg. Then do a wrap cast on by wrapping each of your pegs back to front. When you're at the beginning again, lay your working yarn over the first peg and brace it with your fingers. Lift the bottom loop under it with your hook. Proceed to the others the exact same way. Try not to be too tight or the yarn will be too hard to lift. Once all the pegs have been completed, we can start with the E-wrap stitch, which is worked exactly like the first part of the cast on. Wrap all the pegs round and round. They've all been finished, lift the bottom loop of the last peg over the top. Work backwards, lifting all the bottom loops over the top loops. When I'm done, I usually push down all the loops so I can work my next row. Keep E-wrapping for the desired length you want for your shin to heel. I made the tops of my socks fairly long, so they measured about 6 inches before the heel was worked. Unpause the video when you have 6 inches or more of E-wrapping done for the top of your sock. Finished 6 inches of E-wrapping. Next is the most complicated part of the entire sock once you have the top done. Go ahead and E-wrap 12 pegs only. Then lift all the loops except peg 1. Do not touch it for a while because we're narrowing everything in. Now E-wrap back the direction you came and wrap a total of 11 pegs, including the one you ended on. When you lift the bottom loops over the top again, don't lift the first peg and the 12th pegs a loop. Leave it alone like we did with peg 1. Basically, we go back and forth here, adding 1 peg in at a time and not lifting it over like the others. You will do this until you have 4 pegs with double loops on each side of the neutral ones in the center. If you need to mark the pegs to do this with, that would be a good idea just because this is a little tricky when it comes to keeping track. The ultimate goal is to leave 1 double loop untouched at a time until there's 4 pegs on each side completed. When you're finished, start E-wrapping in a different direction as usual, except you add one of those double loops when you knit over. It might be a little tight, so just slip one strand at a time over the new one. Now go backwards and do the same thing. Add 1 peg's double loops in, and turn around to do the same thing until all of the pegs are back to a single loop. Procedure is called increasing and decreasing to make a sock heel. It sounds confusing, but it's pretty easy. Next step is optional, but it reduces the look of a hole in your sock. Take peg 24 as a loop and stretch it over to peg 1 so they share a loop now. Lift the bottom loop of peg 1 over the top. Now go over to peg 12 and reach over to peg 13 and stretch the loop over. Lift the bottom loop over the top. I learned this trick from loomhat.com and it's great for getting rid of that hole the increasing gives you. Now your heel is done, so we can move on to the easy stuff again. From this point on, E-wrap the length of your foot. I'm not gonna lie, my feet are gigantic and I wear a size 11 shoe in women. So I knitted about 7.5 inches, close to about 7.5 I'd say, of E-wrapping for the length of my foot until I get right over the toe. You want to stop once your yarn starts stretching over the toe. So the best idea for you is just to stick your foot in the loom every now and then. If you're knitting for somebody else, you're going to have to get their foot measurement. A little trick with this, you can actually look up a chart of shoe sizes. As long as you know what their shoe size is, then you can usually get a good idea of how many inches you need to knit. So that's what I did until I had just enough right over my toe, and at that point you'll get ready to bind off, and I'll show you how to do that once you're done with this part. After finishing your foot link, it's time to do a super weird cast off to close the bottom of your sock. First of all, I made a mistake and didn't cut enough yarn for this. But what you would want to do is wrap your working yarn around the loom about 4 to 5 times. I only did 3, and you'll see later how that worked out for me, but I fixed it in the end. Anyway, now cut your yarn from the ball and thread the end with the yarn needle. You can use your hook for this too, but the needle is much easier. Start threading the pegs by going up and through the first peg's loop with the needle. Instead of proceeding with the other pegs to the right, you actually go back to peg 24 and thread it through. Stretch the yarn behind the peg, secure the second peg's loop to the right. Then go back to peg 23. Go back and forth to 1 peg on each side at a time and secure them with the yarn needle until you've reached the last 2. can see that I ran out of yarn, but if this happens to you, here's a way to fix your project without starting over. Cut some extra yarn from the ball and tie it onto the strand you are binding off with. I do 2 knots and make them as tight and small as possible. The only drawback to tying yarn on during this process is that it's a little difficult to pull the knot through the loops at the end, but you can still deal with it easily. Okay, now that I repaired that problem, I finished off the last of my pegs. All you have to do now is pop each and every loop off the loom. Here's the magic part of this bind off. Just start pulling the tail end of your yarn until your sock's bottom closes up. In my case, the knot made it harder for me, but I just take my hook and widen the loops over the knot so it can still slide through. I have to do this for every individual loop, but it's not too bad. Your sock has been bound off, and all you have to do now is weave in the ends. I typically go into the sock from the outside of the crochet hook and grab the tail yarn and curl the end of the sock. This makes a round area for your toes, not just a flat, weird looking place. Then I pull the yarn through and make a knot or two like this. Sometimes they have to go inside out. Lastly, weave the beginning yarn through the inside of the sock. You're all done. These socks are literally one of my favorites to give as Christmas presents, and they usually only take around 2 hours to make. Mix and match with fun colors and brands and enjoy the warm and cozy benefit of wearing these socks around the house. I like slipping my feet in with socks already on because then the socks act like slippers. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial, and don't forget to share my channel with people you think would be interested in loom knitting. Let me know what you think below. See you next Friday. Bye!